Hello, and welcome back to US History and Elections. Today is January 5th, 2021, and it is possibly the most important political moment of the coming year, because today is the Georgia Senate runoffs. And I'm sure, as you all know, it's been across the news. It is, the amount of pressure, focus, and importance that has been put on these two Senate runoffs is very justifiable, as whichever party wins either one of these races or two of them, if it's the Democrats, then they will control the Senate. If Democrats win both these seats, then they control a government trifecta, the House, Senate, and the White House. If the Republicans win at least one of these seats, then they can block or they can possibly block some of Joe Biden and the Democrats' agenda for the next 2 years. Now, who do we have? So in Georgia's Senate runoff, the regular election, we have Democrat John Ossoff challenging the incumbent Senator David Perdue, who is running for a second term. And of course, in Georgia's special election, Johnny Isaacson resigned in late 2019, I believe, due to health concerns, and the appointed Republican senator, Kelly Loeffler, is fighting to gain her own, or for the next 2 years, because there's going to be a proper full term election in 2022, and she is against Reverend Raphael Warnock trying to challenge her for those 2 years. So I'm sure we all know the importance of this. The polls opened about 2.5 hours before this video comes out, and we don't really know any news other than that. One thing we do know though is the previous results from the November election. Now, first of all, we're going to look at David Perdue and how well he did back in November. And remember, in Georgia, for a candidate to win election, they have to get 50% of the vote. David Perdue won. He got more votes than John Ossoff. However, he only managed to get 49.7%. He was really cut down by Shane Hazel, who really stole him the majority that he needed. And John Ossoff still, had a very good showing, 47.9%. But with Shane Hazel, out the race now, they didn't. Only the top two candidates go on for the runoff. This is where it's going to get very tight. And even tighter still is the special election. Of course, there are many candidates here. You see many candidates getting over 1% of the vote and tons of them getting over 0.5% of the vote. But Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler came through, the Democrat and Republican main challengers, even though Doug Collins had a pretty strong campaign against Kelly Loeffler. But at the end of the day, Kelly Loeffler came through with 26% rounded up, and Raphael Warnock took the most votes with about a third of the votes given in this special election back in November. Now, what we're seeing in the polls, I did show you here for a second, but it is very neck and neck. Now, before November 2nd, sorry, when the initial election happened, David Perdue was, possibly considered very likely to win his or to be re-elected to his seat, if not safe. However, as the year went on, 2020 went on, the lead was narrowed and narrowed and narrowed until Ossoff got into the position where he was leading in a few polls, and at the end of the day, he managed to reduce Perdue's vote share under 50%, which is exactly what he was aiming for. And now, as you can see, since then, there's been a lot of up and down. You've seen Ossoff lead, never by more than a point, and same with Purdue leading never more than a point, especially as we went into November. But now we've started to see John Ossoff gain a lead, and on voting day, or when polls opened today, he was leading almost 2 points in the polls. And for Raphael Warnock, it was even larger share of vote. Of course, this one was always classified as the much more tighter one because Kelly Loeffler had never actually been elected by the electorate in Georgia. She was only appointed by the Governor Brian Kemp about a year ago. So, she had something to prove. She had something of a mandate to secure. And again, very close. Of course, Warnock came out on top, but that was because there was two main Republican candidates fighting off in the jungle election in November. And as you can see, the largest lead Raphael Warnock did hold was 3 points, and I think Kelly Loeffler had a very narrow lead going into the Christmas period, but ever since then it has been Warnock, and he has managed to widen that gap to just over 2 points on January the 5th. So by looking at the polls, you'd think that the Democrats are favored to win both of them, which is exactly what they need to win the Senate because, as you know, here it says the Senate currently stands at 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats. So, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris likely to break the ties if the Democrats won both these seats, it is of the utmost importance for the Democrats to win both of these because otherwise Mitch McConnell will be returning to his role as the Senate Majority Leader, which he has held since 2015. But is that exactly how it's going to work? Because we saw back in November, November 1st, so this is just before the election, we saw very mixed results. We saw, ignore Warnock plus 12 as well, because this includes, all the other candidates as well. Lieberman actually did very poorly compared to many of the poll predictions for his finish, but this is essentially how it worked out. And, there were polls saying either way. And of course, because this is now the center of the political universe in America, we are seeing polls, and we have been seeing almost daily polls other than the Christmas period ever since. And we're seeing ones quite large leads. You're seeing a Warnock +9 and Ossoff +8. Realistically, that is definitely not going to happen. But yesterday there were tons of polls added, and I want to stress the importance that Senate polls, especially, polls in general were not too great in last election, and Senate polls were probably the worst out of them. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to these. But as you can see, Warnock is leading in nearly every single one of them, other than this one by the University of Nevada. And Purdue is having, well, actually, we've got another one insider advantage. Leffler is leading by +1. But Ossoff seems to have improved a lot more than Warnock did, because everyone was thinking that Warnock was the favourite. And even me, when I did my prediction for the initial November election, I said both of them would go to a runoff. They both did. And I said when the runoff actually happens, of course, this is in now talking in hindsight, I said that Ossoff was likely the one to lose, and Warnock was the likely one to win out of the Democrats, which would have secured look, I think I predicted other Senate elections to go to the Democrats, so that probably would have given them the majority no matter what happened in Georgia. But now it all comes down to Georgia, so Democrats would need to win both. And my prediction is still realistically a toss up. I mean, if you want to look at the polls as, any indication, then it's exactly what you look at, toss up. If anything, the Democrats may have a very, very narrow advantage, but I'm not entirely sure because Democrats have proven that they can win in Georgia. Stacey Abrams came very close in 2018, and the resentment towards Donald Trump in the 2020 election helped push them over by just over 11,000 votes, in November. Is that enough for them to win both Senate seats, let alone one Senate seat? I'm not entirely sure. So we're going to go on to the Senate map, and this is filled in with the 2020 election results for the Senate. And of course, you see Georgia right here is not filled in. At the moment, looking at all the evidence that is coming up, it is looking like the Democrats are going to do very well in Georgia. Is that going to do enough for them to actually get that 50% margin in what has been a solid red state for the past 3 decades? To win all of them, to win both seats, I do not think so. I do think that one of them is going to win. One of the Republicans is going to hold their incumbency and be re-elected back to the Senate, whether that be David Perdue winning his re-election or Kelly Loeffler, being voted in by the Georgia electorate for the first time instead of being appointed. I'm not entirely sure which way it's going to go. And, polls are open now. I also want to touch on early voting, which is, quite good for the Democrats. It's been, a very good sign for them. You're starting to see a share of black vote go up from 28% in 2020, the early vote was for black Americans, has now gone up to just over 30%, which is very, very good for them because that is probably the most solid bloc out of all the ethnic and racial groups in America. That ethnic and racial group is the most likely and most solid in favor of the Democrats. So they can definitely take that as a good sign. But all this election is going to come down to is turnout. Donald Trump has been doing rallies, Joe Biden has been doing rallies down in Georgia, and it's not just the focus on Atlanta. Of course, Atlanta is very important. Whoever wins Atlanta by a large margin if Democrats win the suburbs, or if Republicans see a resurgence since November, where they saw quite a lot of losses in the Georgia suburbs. Of course, they lost Georgia's, I believe it was sixth or seventh district. That was previously held by a Republican who retired, and a Democrat picked that seat up, one of the only gains in the House for the Democrats. But if the Republicans can fight back only a few, only a few 10,000 votes, 30, 40,000 votes in the suburbs, start to switch back, as well as, huge voting numbers in the rural areas of Georgia, which are very, very solid Republican, then they could win both, and it would be a 52-48 majority for the Republicans in the Senate. So it's interesting to look at. It's very interesting to look at because it could go either way. Of course, Democrats could have huge voter turnout. Or they could, do very well or today when people actually come out to vote in at the polls, and the Republicans may not see the turnout that they were expecting because what they need is huge voter turnout today to counteract the huge early voting numbers. I believe it's just shy of 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 million votes cast early. Of course, a lot of them are going to be for the Democratic Senate candidates here, and it's going to be a very tough one. I think I'm going to stick with my previous prediction that I had, John Warnock narrowly edging it, but I would not, and there we go, John Warnock, Raphael Warnock narrowly edging the special election, and David Perdue narrowly edging the regular election. But realistically, it could be the other way. Kelly Loeffler wins and John Ossoff wins. It could be two Republicans going back to Washington, or it could be two new Democratic challengers going into Washington and securing a Democratic Senate. Realistically, I don't want to be I don't want to be saying any odds because the odds have actually shifted in recent days as well. We've started to see around a 6 in 10 chance on most betting sites going towards the Democrats. That is a huge shift from what it was. It used to be 50-50. In the last few days, there's been quite a lot of the news. Trump's phone call to the Georgia uh, elections officer, and there's a lot going on in the news, and whether the two Republican candidates who have strongly linked themselves with Trump do get that huge Trump base to come out to vote for them is going to have to be seen, because we are not going to get the results tonight. That has already been basically confirmed by the Georgia election office. Everything they're saying that this is going to go into the early hours of tomorrow morning, if not a few days after, if it's as razor thin as we all expect it to be. So this is my prediction at the moment. I'm going to keep it how it was before the November election because it's just got so tight. But realistically, these are two very big toss-up races. There's no confirmed way which way these are going to go. They could, like I said, both go to the Democrats, be split between the two parties, or both go to the Republicans. It's really going to depend on how voter turnout occurs in the rural areas, in Atlanta and its suburbs, and across the whole state of Georgia. If the Democrats can pick up, or retain the voters that voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump, and if Donald Trump can secure the voter turnout that he so craves, then that will help the Republicans win. But I think I'm going to end it there because it's a very interesting race that could have very, very different outcomes. But we're going to have to wait and see, and I'm definitely going to be waiting on this. I might probably make a follow-up video in the coming days once we know the results and what we saw in the election, whether it was as close as many of the polls and many of the outlooks are predicting, or whether it was a surprise victory for either party. So, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all again soon.